Oh, I think, yes, I like this question. So what is, and you can use the chat, bless you, Kelsey. You can use the chat, you can use your mic, but what's your favorite routine or tradition? And this is just kind of the getting to know you question, a fun way for us to understand who we are. And so I'm Jennifer Coffey from Office of Special Education Programs, and I'm the program lead for the SPDIGs. And so my favorite routine is in the morning. I drink green tea. I feel like almost like a tea ceremony at this point. I had to go off of coffee. And so this is my replacement. So I like it strong. I have green tea and I read some spiritual things and I do a little meditation / prayer, and it takes me about an hour and I love it. And so I sit on my porch to do that until it's under 40 degrees. Does anyone else like, oh, watching the Macy's Day Parade? So fun. Yep, it can be outside work, it could be inside work. Drinking coffee and reading the paper. Excellent. And tell me what's going on in the world. Matcha green tea, that's what I do. Wordle, I gotta try Wordle. PBS NewsHour, making applesauce in the fall. Fun. Wish I could have some. I love applesauce. Arranging rocks, very zen. Good. Taking dog for a walk, Sunday family dinners. Good. Listening to a book on tape. Buying school supplies. That never gets old, right? I mean, the thing that I really loved also, other than getting the Trapper Keeper, was the new outfit for the first day of school. Some things never change for me. Good. Well, thanks everyone for sharing. It was nice to find out more about you. All right. So today, just a little background about today's, why we're talking about what we're talking about, and how about what we're talking about. Let's do a little slideshow. All right, so we're talking about integrating MTSS into IHE, so university, more simply, syllabi and curricula. So some of you are in a university, sitting in a university, so to speak. Some of you are at the SEA. Some of you are in a regional education service agency, and et cetera. There are other places as well. But thinking about the SPDIG work and anything we do in professional development and in service, you got to think about what you would like universities to do to support the same skills, knowledge, and abilities, right? Or knowledge, skills, and ability. So let's get a little bit deeper into why. Well, here's the agenda, and then I guess we'll get deeper into why. So we're going to talk about why we're focusing on collaborating with IHEs first. And then we'll talk about the article that I sent out. It is very brief, like literally 3 pages. So if you didn't read it, you can read it right after we meet, but I'll give you the basic ideas of it. It was just something to kind of base our conversation in. What does OSEP learn from past efforts of what works working with IHEs, how you build those relationships and collaborations? I'll share that with you, at least what I've learned. Ask what you have learned, because this is not your first day at work. You've had other experiences. I want to hear about it. What your vision would be. If all things were possible, what would your SPDIG relationship look like with the IHEs in your state? And then we're going to hear from the Cedar Center, which supports the SEA relationship with their universities, the certification system or the licensing system, et cetera. And they're going to talk about, Lindsay's going to talk about what Cedar Center has to offer in this work. And then we'll talk about next steps for this group, if we're going to continue this conversation or move on to others. So why this topic? This, I will never forget this quote. This was from when I was in a state Department of Education. One of the districts, an administrator there said this, and I've just always remembered it. She was implementing MTSS, and they were one of the first districts to do so. They were actually famous for that because they were in articles. They ended up having a model demonstration site there. Lots of researchers came in. So she was famous for that. But even though they had been implementing, what at the time was called response to intervention and positive behavioral interventions and supports on the behavioral side for years, this is what she said when I came to visit her. I don't expect our new hires to know anything about instruction. At this point, I just want them not to be philosophically opposed to what we do here. That was after all those years and all the publicity they got as being the district that was doing it right. That was still where they were with the educator preparation system. So why is this topic important? Other than, moving on from that quote, is because you can only do so much with professional development. Teachers and other educators only have so many hours to give. Plus what you learn in your educator preparation program really sticks with you, right? Like it gives you, like that administrator was saying, gives you kind of a philosophical basis, a way of seeing the world. And if you see the world as something where you know how to find the right interventions, you know how to use progress monitoring, you know how to do screening, et cetera, things are going to fall into place much more easily. And the other training you receive is just going to be building on that. Another reason that we're having this conversation is that each of the SPDIGs has to have a contract or subgrant in place with at least one university. And so thinking about what's possible, you have at least one that you have to have a relationship with. So what's possible in that relationship? So any other reasons out there why you think this is an important conversation?
I would just say that I think it's the continuing conversation about the disconnect between theory and practice, and how so much of our work in teacher preparation, is based on the research, which is really what needs to happen. But then I hear that once students get out in the field, it's not like that at all, or and so how do we align those two things together? So I think this work certainly could support that.
I love that point you made, because I was just talking about what's missing from educator preparation, but it could be that they're getting a lot of what they need, but the philosophy or the practices at the schools, districts they go to are not. They're not using evidence-based practices. They don't think they can have an impact on kids. They think kids come the way they're going to be, et cetera. So that's a really good point. Thank you, Tim. Increased capacity to dive deeper when we're not focused on foundations in PD. That's right. So if you keep on having to start from the beginning in service, you're missing a lot of opportunity. Great. Thanks, Kristen. All right. So for those of you who did have a chance to read the short article, I'm interested in any ideas it gave you or what you'd want to know more about. What did it spark? Schools are far superior in knowledge. Oh, okay. So this is to generally the conversation. And Carol is saying, I find our schools are far superior in knowledge of EBPs than our universities. Okay. But back to that other way. I don't know if any of you all remember, was it the National Center on Teacher Quality? Or was that ours? It was a name kind of like that. And they're probably still around. But they're
National Council.
Is it
Kate Walsh? Well, she just retired.
That's exactly
National Council on Teacher Quality.
Thank you. And you remember that report they came out with where it showed how few EBPs are being supported in universities and how, oh man, that was in our world, that was like a huge volcanic eruption, right? Everyone else around us who's not in our world was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but we knew. And that was one of my professors was involved in that. I think there's potential to maybe that should have been done a different way, but but it is really important information to that point, Carol. All right, so these were the big ideas that I pulled from the article. So there was a call to action that teacher preparation programs must include professional competencies that ensure teacher candidates are prepared with the knowledge, skills, and resources necessary to effectively teach students with diverse learning needs. I have to say, this is not surprising to anyone here, but I was on a call with someone who's creating academies in their state for, kind of a grow your own academy, which is fantastic. And they were, trying to reach tribal youth, and all this is great. They didn't have any content in special education. And they said, oh, this conversation really got me thinking that people should have some understanding of how to support kids with disabilities. Yes. But we keep on having that conversation over and over again. And then also the article stated the educator preparation program should include resources, tools, and protocols from nationally vetted and federally funded centers such as IRIS, CEDAR, and National Center on Intensive Intervention. IRIS being, hopefully everyone knows IRIS, but they have lots of modules and ways you can be trained asynchronously. CEDAR, as I was talking about before, works in a state system for the educator preparation program and thinks about the pipeline and certification and standards. National Center on Intensive Intervention is just that, is thinking about how to support educators, administrators, and others to provide intensive intervention when needed. So thinking about UDL, individualization, data-driven decision-making, and then it talks about equipping teachers with the necessary skills and application of some of these principles and practices, and having the ability to make data-informed decisions, which sometimes we think is just happening, but you all are doing the work, so you know that it's not always the case. So here's in the article, this isn't a great image of it. You can look back at the article to see the original, but it gives an overview of what each center provides, and then what might be useful for a tier 1 level of MTSS, a tier 2 level, and a tier 3 level. And as I said, we have Lindsay Hayes here with us today from the CEDAR Center. And so she's going to talk a little bit about what they have. So for the innovation configuration, they also have course enhancement modules and tools, and you can see the tools and practices. All right. Oh, so I should say, any other questions or thoughts about the article or what these centers provide related to MTSS before we get on to our next question? All right. So what is, from the OSEP perspective, what have we learned about collaborating with IHEs? One thing is that often OSEP project money, including the SPDIG, can be used to support IHE faculty and leadership in one way or another. So if you are trying to build a relationship, I highly recommend the IHEs you want to work with finding out what they want and need that they don't have the money to do right now, and seeing if it's a fit with your SPDIG. And of course, you want to bring that to your project officer and have a conversation about it, because it would be a change in your budget. But if you have money and you think these relationships are important, which I tend to think these relationships are important, what do they want or need? Do they want to go to a conference that your team is going to, and you could go together and actually have these conversations, build the relationship, think about how to work together? Do they want to meet together across universities to discuss MTSS, and you can provide the space and perhaps the working lunch and that kind of thing? So again, in conversation with your project officer, thinking through what you might be able to support with your SPDIG funding that's going to move you down the road of collaboration. Helping to make connections between the deans and the districts. So the dean of the College of Education, the district leadership, deans should know what the districts want and need when it comes to the educators, the personnel working in them. This goes for early childhood as well. I'm kind of talking in the K-12 world. So you'd have to extrapolate if you're talking about Part C. But deans need to be hearing from district leadership, and perhaps vice versa, but more of that. What do that you want? What are the competencies you expect in your personnel when they come to the district? What's missing? What's been working well? You can talk about strengths too, but you can set up those relationships because you're working directly with sites, with programs, district schools. Considering all the OSEP funded projects in your state, work with your project officer if you don't know what else OSEP is funding in your state. And in G5, we can come up with a list of everything going on in your state that potentially is better than the database that's publicly available. And we can help you make connections with the project directors of those different projects. If you have a doc program in your state or more than one, maybe those doc students want an internship. Maybe they want to do a dissertation on something that would really help you. Maybe they want to work side by side and learn what it's like to be at an SEA or an education service agency, etc. So that's my perspective. Any questions about the ideas I have here? All right. So the next, you see the question mark there, because these are all questions for you, and you're going to have a chance in a breakout to talk about it with 2 other people. The questions are, what have you learned about collaborating with IHEs? What challenges have you faced? And what questions do you still have? These are just jumping off points. If you want to go in a very specific direction, please do. Kelsey's created a Padlet so that you can have these questions available to you and take some notes on the Padlet. And then when we come back together, we'll have those, we'll have them recorded and we can share with you after the group so you can see what other people were thinking. So Kelsey will put the Padlet into the chat right now. And then she's going to break you up for 10 minutes. Any questions? Again, the questions are on, sorry, the Jamboard, not Padlet. The questions are on the Jamboard, but you can take it a different direction if you'd like. There are going to be 3 people and it's 10 minutes. Any questions about that before we break out? Okay, good to go. Thank you. Hi, Amanda. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. I hope it was a good conversation. I was just really enjoying looking at the Jamboard, and I'm sure you were too, since you can see it as you go. But what I saw so far, what have you learned about collaborating with IHEs? It was nice. There was a lot of like, things are not easy for them necessarily, and understanding, which of course is that empathy is necessary to build relationship. So would anyone like to share anything that especially resonated in their breakout room about what you've learned about collaborating with IHEs?
Cheryl and I ended up together, which is funny because we work on the same project.
Happened before.
Yes. But she shared some of the experiences of previous SPDIGs that I was not part of. And I think really what resonated with me and what I found interesting, because she asked about what it looked like when we approached our new IHE partner and if there were challenges there. But what was interesting to me was in previous SPDIGs, even when they were offering a fairly large pot of money for partnership, it wasn't really enough for the IHEs at that time. Whereas now we're not giving a lot of money in this partnership, but we're adding a lot of value to their coursework and providing additional opportunities for their students. And that seemed to be what was particularly valuable to this IHE and to this program, was extending opportunities to their students that would enhance their experience.
Excellent. Yeah, so it might not always be money. That's a great point. It might not always be money, but you're somehow providing something that they need. Great. I really like this quote. In order to be at the table, we need to provide the table, separate from the accreditation standards revisions. I think that's great. I mean, it's just like I don't know about mnemonic, but it's just a way to visualize what you might need to provide to start the conversation or to keep the conversation going.
And that kind of comes from Montana, and Annette's pretty familiar with this. So in Montana, I think 20 years ago, our SPDIG director established a higher education consortium. And so that's part of our role, is to facilitate that. But I sometimes wonder, would we be invited if we weren't the host of the party? Because there is, or, you know, not a party, but that collaboration that, like, would we be included if we weren't facilitating it and providing that opportunity for engagement? And so that's some of my other hat as part of our special education division, but it is interesting. Like, I sometimes feel like that in order to be invited, we have to be the host. But.
Yeah. All right, the next question is, what challenges have you experienced? I didn't get a chance to read these yet. Does anyone want to share something that resonated in their room about the challenges collaborating with IHEs?
This is Annette. So Mary and Lindsay and I partnered, and Mary and I concurred that, and Lindsay, some of the challenges come back maybe from those of us who've been around a while. And we experienced the disconnect or the frustration or whatever, however you want to label that. And so building those relationships and regaining that trust isn't necessarily as easy as we would think it would be, because we remember, you know, and we're like, yeah, we've been here once, and maybe we're not so willing to go there again. So it's just the nature of people.
Yeah, I think that's great, because it is more often than not, we're having conversations about how educators and other personnel are being prepared and they don't have what they need. And it's like kind of at least for me, sometimes a blaming mindset, as opposed to trying to understand what else has gone on there. Yeah. Okay, great. These are really good. And then the last.
Oh, I was just one thing, Jennifer, our groups, like we were talking most about pre-service teachers initially, but then I started thinking of all the connections of where we are inviting professors to do our professional development training, and how we're sometimes reliant. We do use some of our in-state professors and experts, but then sometimes we're reliant on other universities that have stronger MTSS implementation. So then we're kind of outsourcing. And so that blend or that balance of who are the knowledge experts in this content, but also utilizing in-state resources for those that service teacher to professional development.
Yep, absolutely. Good. Well, thanks everyone for sharing. Thanks for having good conversations. Yeah, there was some agreement. Christians. And so the next question we have for you before we learn more about CEDAR is, you know, now you've thought about some of the challenges, some of kind of what you've learned. And the question is, in your vision of a perfect world for your SPDIG, what would IHEs in your state be doing to integrate MTSS into their educator preparation programs? So if everything went exactly how you wanted to, you just got to speak the words and they manifested the actions, what would IHEs in your state be doing to integrate MTSS into their educator preparation programs? Now, we have a Mentimeter for this. Kelsey's going to pop in the chat. I'm sure she already did, because she's usually faster than me. And also, I'll stop sharing because Kelsey, you need to share your screen, right? And I'm going to add to this Menti too, because, yeah, I like this topic. Okay, so use our materials. They're already created and ready for use. No need to duplicate efforts. Love that. Partner directly with schools and be a regular part of their team. Teacher candidates to observe and learn. Great. Should be happening, right? Prepare educators and other pros to screen, choose interventions, part of, oh, that was mine. 100% integration and alignment of all teacher ed programs focused on MTSS framework for everyone. A framework, MTSS, a framework woven through the teacher preparation courses and practica instead of being a singular session, kind of like special ed is a singular session. Embedding MTSS content throughout gen ed programs, not just into lone special education courses. Good. Hold more university. Will you scroll down just a little bit, Kelsey? Thank you. Hold more university-based reading clinics with local teachers as part of the program. Good. I've seen that done. SPED shouldn't be standalone. Title I and SPED, thinking special education, think about that. Three-tiered model. Providing foundation for evidence-based practices. Share course information, degree outline, syllabi, et cetera, so we can work together. Good. So having that transparency, understanding, these are fantastic. Thank you so much. So I think it's really good to have your vision because some of you got to talk to her already. I didn't even know she was here because she was under a different title, which she didn't realize either. It's Lindsay Hayes. And so that's why I was trying to figure out like CDE, is it California? Is it Colorado? And it's Lindsay from Cedar. So Kelsey, if you could pin Lindsay. She was kind enough to join us last minute and is a co-director for the Cedar Center. She's going to tell us more about it. We talked a little bit, I think you saw that, Lindsay, we talked a little bit about the overall, you know, what Cedar does and what they can do for MTSS, but we would love to hear from your perspective. And would you like me to share the slides that you provided?
Jennifer, in a moment, that would be great. Would I be able to share my screen up
Absolutely.
until then? Great. So hi, everybody. I apologize that I was incognito under a different name. That was a holdover from an in-person meeting last week. So hello, everybody. I am Lindsay Hayes from the Cedar Center. Jennifer gave a pretty good description of who we are and what we are about. We are an OSEP-funded technical assistance center, and our charge is to build robust systemic networks for teacher and leader preparation reform within states. So what we want to do is strengthen partnerships between state education agencies and networks of educator preparation programs within states, bringing in local districts as it's appropriate, to make sure that there's a really robust feedback loop between practice and policy. So on one hand, we are interested in doing that nitty-gritty on the ground reform work with our ed prep partners, you know, reviewing syllabi, enhancing courses, thinking differently about clinical and field experiences, ensuring culturally responsive practices and evidence-based practices are embedded. We do all of that, but from that systemic perspective, what we then want to do is make sure that there's a feedback loop with policy. So making sure that state level policies like licensure and certification, program approval standards, all of those policies support really high quality preparation. So when I give my spiel about the Cedar Center, I say we're all about creating that feedback loop between policy and practice and strengthening those partnerships between the state and networks of IHEs. If you are interested, first things first, if you are interested in knowing whether you are working in a current Cedar state, I encourage you to check out our website, cedar.org. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page, we have a nice little interactive map that tells you where we are currently working. That will become a little bit more relevant later when I talk about what kinds of ongoing support and partnerships that Cedar might be able to offer you within the context of your state. Before then, I'm going to very quickly highlight a couple universally available resources and then give two very specific examples of how we have worked with current Cedar State teams around this idea of MTSS and embedding MTSS content within prep programs. So I believe I saw this on a previous slide, which I really, really appreciated. Highlighting Cedar's resources of the course enhancement modules and the innovation configurations. The course enhancement modules, I wish that I had a lot of time to talk about these because there is truly such a depth of information here, but a very short overview will have to suffice. These are essentially modules that could make up an entire course that are marketed to faculty and professional development providers. They can be used in whole or in part to supplement material that's occurring in coursework. If I were a higher education faculty member and I wanted to make sure that I was using up-to-date evidence-based material within my classes, this is where I would start. There is just a huge amount of material within each of these topics, enough honestly to build out an undergraduate or graduate level class. But there are also, I think, a more common way that folks tend to use these is if there are particular topics within one of these areas that they want to focus on. You know, for instance, I really want to bolster a module, let's say on phonemic awareness in my reading course. There would be material in these course enhancement modules that would help. I will further add that the way that we have set up these course enhancement modules corresponds with tiers of MTSS. So when we are talking about particularly content areas like reading or math or writing, we have our course enhancement modules set up in a way where we talk about, you know, here's what reading instruction looks like at tier 1. Here's what it looks like at tier 2. Here's what it looks like at tier 3. So within each of these modules, I do think it's important for this group to know they are organized around that MTSS framework. The other resource that I saw highlighted on that chart were our innovation configurations. The innovation configurations are self-assessment tools that faculty can use to evaluate the extent to which evidence-based practices in a particular area are being covered within a program, and not only whether they are being covered in a program, but whether they are being taught, practiced, and applied by teacher candidates. So this is really a great resource if you have an IHE that's interested in doing sort of a self-assessment program review for the purposes of self-reflection. We have these resources that can assist with that process and making sure that the essential components of each of these areas are covered within the course, but also taught, practiced, and applied. There, I think we have 16, I believe, different topics here. So everything from UDL to behavior to reading to math to supporting students with severe disabilities. There's really a wealth of resources here. Something, however, that you will not find on the CEDAR innovation configurations public page on our website is an innovation configuration for MTSS. And the reason for that is because MTSS, as I'm sure you all know from being in this community of practice and talking to one another, the structures of MTSS vary so widely from state to state that it is actually very difficult. We have tried before. It is very difficult to create an innovation configuration that is responsive to the needs across all states, but also specific enough that it can really lead to some change within ed prep programs. So for that reason, you will not see an overarching MTSS innovation configuration. When we have a state that really wants to do what the topic of this conversation today is, they want IHEs to go in and really take a look at MTSS content and how it's embedded within ed prep programs. What we do is go through a process to develop a state-specific MTSS innovation configuration. We have done this twice in 2 different states, Georgia and New York. I am happy to put these materials in the chat pod after I'm finished talking through them. But what we do is bring our state teams together. And again, that includes SEA representatives and ed prep programs. And we think about their statewide model for MTSS. What are the essential components of that model? And how do we pull that out into a way that defines what we want teachers to be able to know and do? So here you can see Georgia's state-specific MTSS innovation configuration. I'll just scroll through it really quickly. We see some very high level, you know, what are the non-negotiables? What are the essential components in that Georgia MTSS system that we need to be covering in a preparation program? Once we go beyond that first essential component, we start diving down into, well, what does the multi-level prevention system really look like? What do teacher candidates and people in preparation programs need to know about tier 1? What do they need to know about screening? What do they need to know about tiers 2 and 3? So on and so forth. So the process that we use to create these state-specific innovation configurations, it's very collaborative. We are, deeply diving into whatever MTSS framework is available from the state. We are creating this in connection with the faculty who are really the experts on what those teachers need to know and be able to do when they come out of their prep programs. And we work together to create a framework that we can then turn into our assessment tool.
Lindsay, there was a question, should we be seeing something from Georgia, or were you just
I
describing it?
apologize. I bet you I didn't share that correctly. Let's try again. And folks, I am very happy to put these in the chat pod afterwards so you can peruse.
That'd be great.
So apologies for that.
That's fine.
I was showing the MTSS configuration with the essential components, starting with an overview, the essential components that we want teacher candidates to know and to be able to demonstrate their skill in at tier 1, universal screening, tier 2. So you see the topics and then the essential knowledge and skills that we want to see embedded within preparation programs. So I'm gonna share the New York one really briefly, just to show you an alternate example and how different these can look from state to state. Can you all see the New York example now?
Not yet, still on Georgia.
Try that one more time. Can we see New York now?
Yes.
New York, I think I really want to highlight because in New York, their MTSS integrated framework, that's MTSSI is the acronym there, they have a real focus on students who are culturally and linguistically diverse. They have a real focus on embedding culturally responsive practices within MTSS. And so I will share these two examples so you can see just how state specific we want to make these. In this New York MTSS innovation configuration, we have a lot of language about supporting culturally responsive and sustaining practices in connection with the state's framework.
And just so you know, Lindsay, Stacy Williams, Steve Marchant, and Suzanne Corey are all here from New York, in case, just to connect you. And
Absolutely.
So you know that they're here.
So we have a network of EPPs that we work with through CEDAR, in addition to NICED partners, and we co-developed this MTSS innovation configuration, again, after looking very carefully through the components of the MTSSI framework, considering their culturally responsive and sustaining education framework that's present in the state, and really, I think, have a product that is very tailored to New York and defines what a New York State teacher needs to know and be able to do when they come out of their preparation programs. So what you're seeing is sort of the essential components that are part of that tool, the innovation configuration tool and process, what that review actually looks like when you're going through syllabi. I would be happy to talk with anybody about what that looks like further. But perhaps this is a good time now, Jennifer, to go back into the slide deck and talk about, okay, CEDAR has great universal resources, but really, if we're looking for long-term partnership, what can CEDAR offer? So first things first, I believe I had told everybody that if you're not sure whether or not you're in a CEDAR state, please go on our website, scroll down on the home page to the bottom, and you'll be able to tell whether or not you are in a CEDAR state. If you are a grantee who is working in a current CEDAR state, that's wonderful. I would love to talk with you about getting your project connected in with our broader efforts. As I mentioned, that's something we're definitely doing in New York and Georgia, and they're really great examples of the potential and what this work can look like. We are happy to help broker a connection with your CEDAR team. We're always looking to expand SEA representation. We're always looking to scale to additional IHE partners. That's something we've been able to do very successfully over the 10 years that we've had the grant. So if you're in a CEDAR state, please drop me a line. I would love to talk with you. If you are in a non-CEDAR state, somebody who is not receiving services right now, there are still ways that we can support you. As Jennifer mentioned, our focus and our charge from OSEP is really systemic reform. So unfortunately, Support to individual IHEs on a one-off basis, we have to keep that very, very limited. Of course, I am happy to talk about resources that Cedar has to offer with anyone, but in terms of longer term, more sustained support, we do have to make sure that we're bringing in that systemic perspective and involving multiple partners from the SEA and the IHEs. So something that we could do in non-Cedar states is that we could work with you on a short-term limited basis to help start to create those partnerships, connect with that network of IHEs, and talk about what it would mean to have a focus on MTSS. And then more concretely, once we have that sort of group established that includes that SEA and IHE representation, we can do a similar process to what we did in Georgia and New York and work collaboratively among those partners to develop a state-specific MTSS innovation configuration. And here's a really great value add: train faculty on how to use Cedar's online IC system. So we have a nice system set up to make the data entry process for that very smooth. The output, the reports that are generated from that are just really great ways to spark reflection. And if we were able to engage with a team again with the SEA and IHE representatives, we would be able to provide some shorter term support around developing that IEC and utilizing the online IEC system. So that is my spiel. I am going to start popping things in the chat pod left and right, but would love to hear your questions. Anything, folks?
Oh, thanks for adding that to it. Information or innovation.
Lindsay, this is Stacy speaking. I really like the information that you're sharing. I just have sort of like an organizational question. Do you guys also partner with other programs that work in education? The only reason why I say this, that I have experience where a lot of the information that you've shared is actually taught in school psychology graduate program to students in the teacher education program. So does Cedar also partner with school psych programs who are doing some of this work?
We do not have a focus on supporting related services personnel right now. That's a bit beyond our scope, but I do think you make a very good point. And I think there are times when we're providing support to individual IHEs where we do very much want to make those connections and are able to do that on a little bit more of an individualized program basis. I'm all about, Jennifer, you can take this back to your OSEP colleagues. I'm all about Cedar getting more money so we can add in related services personnel as well.
The only reason why I said that, Lindsay, is that I'm just coming out of a faculty position, but I was hired in the psychology department, but I consulted with the education department and developing coursework to teach the very things that you're talking about to teacher educators. So it wasn't a class per se that was in the education department. So I was just wondering, like, are we missing the boat? Because, you know, earlier folks were talking about it's like really hard to like change curriculum and all of those things. And a lot of the things that we're requiring teacher eds to do typically haven't been done by teacher education. So just something to think about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other questions? I've also put my email in the chat pod. I am happy to talk with any of you about making these connections in your states. I am happy to, on a one-off basis, go through any of these resources in more depth. Truly, just a handful of minutes doesn't do our universal resources justice. So I'm happy to do a more in-depth overview if anybody would like that. But always happy to make a connection. We're very, I think the states in which we have been able to make that partnership with SPDIGs, it has definitely strengthened what we are able to accomplish together. And I really think that this focus on MTSS is a good direction for us to head as we begin our next 5 years of funding.
Excellent. Well, we're so happy you got to join us. Thank you for making time. And, you know, I heard about all the things that your group is up to right this week. It's a busy week. So thank you for making time for us. And it's good to see you. I think Lindsay and I actually live quite close to each other, unless you've moved, Lindsay.
I think we're practically neighbors. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. So we'll have coffee at least sometime. All right, so our next question for you, we've had lots of questions, is what are 3 big ideas you took away? And this is a lot, but take a minute to think about 3 ideas that resonated with you, 2 questions you still have, and 1 action you will take. So let's just take a minute to have everyone think about it. And at the end of the minute, I'll give the instruction of what to do with that information. So 3 big ideas that you got, 2 questions you still have, and that's from the whole time. 2 questions and 1 action. Now, if you could add just 1 thing, you could pick from any of these areas, you just add 1 thing to the chat. It can be an idea, it can be a question, it can be an action. So Mary already added something. Thank you, Mary. Good statement. Oh, good. Nice to hear. All right. So hopefully, if you didn't put in the chat yet and you don't get a chance, at least you have it in your head. So next steps, we have a quick poll in the last minute about, do you want to continue this topic with this group about IHE collaboration, or do you think we've pretty much done it? Or do you want to start talking about capacity, fidelity, sustainability, or family engagement? What do we do next? I chose these topics because in a survey, that's what folks said they wanted to know more about. So do we continue the IHEs? Do you do fidelity? Do you do capacity, family engagement, sustainability? Okay, Lindsay. All right, do we have the results? All right, so continue this had the most. Okay, so we can do that, and then we can get into family engagement and sustainability next. We will do it. So if folks have ideas about how to continue this topic, just go ahead and email me. I think you know how to reach me, or Kelsey. And it was good to see you all. Thank you, Lindsay, and everyone have a good afternoon. And we'll be seeing you soon.